If there were one of the most influential factors in protecting yourself from cancer after turning 50, it might not involve costly drugs, complex medical procedures, or anything your physician has likely emphasized before. It could be something so understated that most people completely miss it. And yet, evidence in scientific literature has been quietly reinforcing this idea for years, aligning with what a small number of oncology specialists have observed in practice. Stay with this idea, because what follows has reshaped how I approach patient guidance, and it may shift how you view your own health in a lasting way. I am Dr. Bran, and my work in oncology spans more than 2 decades. In that time, I have spoken with thousands of patients, delivered diagnoses I always wished I never had to give, and repeatedly reflected on one question: what interventions earlier in life could have changed these outcomes? The deeper I explored clinical data, the more consistently one theme appeared, yet it remains underrepresented in mainstream health discussions. That theme is chronic inflammation, and its powerful connection to cancer development after the age of 50. Before the term inflammation gets dismissed as something minor, it is important to clarify its meaning. Most people associate inflammation with short-term, visible reactions like a swollen joint or a sore throat. That is acute inflammation, and it serves a protective function. It is the immune system responding exactly as designed. A cut occurs, and the body immediately directs immune activity to the area. Harmful microbes are controlled. Tissue repair begins. This is controlled biology working correctly. However, there is another form that operates very differently. It is not obvious, not painful, and not easily detected. Instead, it persists quietly in the background, often for years. This is chronic low-grade inflammation. Research now indicates that this persistent state plays a significant role in cancer formation and progression. A major review published in Nature Reviews Cancer identified chronic inflammation as a contributing element in roughly 25% of all cancers globally. Additional large-scale research following more than 100,000 adults found that individuals with elevated inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein experience significantly higher incidence of colorectal, lung, and breast cancers over a 15-year observation period. That 25% figure becomes even more striking in the context of lifetime cancer risk statistics. The biological explanation lies in how cells divide continuously throughout the body. DNA replication is usually highly precise, but chronic inflammation introduces persistent oxidative stress. This exposes cells to reactive molecules known as free radicals, which can interfere with genetic copying processes. When DNA damage occurs and is not properly corrected, mutations may accumulate. Over time, enough accumulated genetic errors can contribute to uncontrolled cellular growth, which is what defines cancer. Chronic inflammation also affects immune surveillance in another critical way. It weakens the activity of natural killer cells, which are responsible for identifying abnormal or potentially cancerous cells and eliminating them before they spread. These immune cells function as a continuous monitoring system, but when inflammation remains elevated for long periods, that system becomes less efficient, slowing detection and response. This creates an opportunity for abnormal cells to survive and expand. One additional factor becomes more pronounced after age 50. The body naturally shifts toward a more inflammatory internal environment. This age-related biological transition is known as inflammaging, a blend of inflammation and aging. As aging progresses, immune regulation becomes less balanced, contributing to this sustained inflammatory state. It leads to increased production of inflammatory signaling molecules, known as cytokines, while at the same time becoming less capable of shutting down inflammation once it begins. Lifestyle factors such as diet, sleep quality, and stress exposure, along with daily habits, are often tolerated in the 30s. But after the age of 50, they begin to accumulate and impact in a way they did not before. The conditions shift, and many people are never told that the rules have changed. This brings us back to the key question. What is the simple, evidence-supported approach used in clinical guidance for managing chronic inflammation and lowering cancer risk? It is a Mediterranean anti-inflammatory dietary pattern combined with one daily behavior that is frequently neglected or done incorrectly. Starting with diet, the evidence base is extensive. A large European investigation known as the EPIC study, the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition, followed more than 500,000 individuals across 10 countries for over 10 years. The outcomes were consistent across populations. People whose eating patterns emphasized vegetables with rich color variety, legumes, whole grains, olive oil, fish, and nuts showed significantly lower rates of multiple cancers when compared to those following a typical Western dietary pattern, high in processed foods, refined sugars, and red meat. In several cancer types, the reduction reached between 30 and 40%. The biological explanation lies in how these food groups influence inflammatory pathways at the molecular level. Extra virgin olive oil, for instance, contains a compound called oleocanthal, which acts through a mechanism similar to ibuprofen by inhibiting inflammatory enzymes. The difference is that this intake comes through daily food rather than medication, such as drizzling it over meals. Leafy green vegetables including spinach, arugula, and kale provide high levels of folate and antioxidants that support DNA stability during cell division. Fatty fish such as salmon and sardines contain omega-3 fatty acids, which have been shown across multiple studies to reduce circulating inflammatory markers like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, both key drivers of chronic inflammation. Berries such as blueberries, strawberries, and raspberries contain anthocyanins and resveratrol, which are polyphenols studied for their anti-cancer potential. Research published in Cancer Research demonstrated that resveratrol may interfere with several stages of cancer development, from initiation through progression and metastasis. These findings are not marginal. They are documented in peer-reviewed research from leading medical journals. However, the dietary component alone is described as incomplete without another major factor. That factor is consistent, moderate daily movement, considered one of the most underappreciated tools in cancer risk reduction. This does not refer to extreme athletic training or long hours in a gym. It refers to 30 to 45 minutes of moderate intensity movement each day, such as brisk walking, swimming, or cycling, performed in a way that can be sustained long-term. The significance is not limited to energy expenditure. At a cellular level, physical activity triggers important biochemical changes. During moderate aerobic exercise, muscles release signaling proteins called myokines, which exert anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body. Exercise also lowers circulating insulin and insulin-like growth factor levels. When these remain chronically elevated, they create hormonal conditions that support cancer cell growth and proliferation. The American Cancer Society, in its most recent guidelines, identifies physical inactivity as one of the leading modifiable risk factors for cancer, ranking only behind smoking and obesity. Despite this, it remains widely underemphasized in routine clinical advice. A large meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine reported that individuals who met recommended physical activity levels had a 20 to 30% lower risk of colon cancer, a 20 to 30% lower risk of breast cancer, and significantly reduced risk of endometrial and lung cancers compared to inactive individuals. With walking, this is not experimental. It is established science. Now I want to pause on something you may already be thinking. You might say that this advice sounds familiar. Eat better, exercise more. It is not new information. And that is true. But what is different here is not the advice itself. It is the mechanism behind it. It is the understanding that the goal is not only general well-being, weight control, or feeling healthier. It is the direct and measurable reduction of the inflammatory state inside the body that contributes to cancer development. When viewed through that lens, behavior changes in a different way. Consistency becomes easier to understand. Motivation becomes more specific. There is another key element that must be included, and it is often underestimated by patients: sleep. More precisely, sleep quality, and sleep duration after the age of 50. During sleep, the body carries out essential cellular repair processes that cannot be completed during waking hours. DNA repair enzymes reach peak activity during deep sleep stages. the immune system strengthens and organizes its response. Waste products generated by metabolism are cleared through the glymphatic system, which is most active during sleep. Research indicates that chronic sleep deprivation, defined as regularly sleeping fewer than 6 hours per night, is associated with elevated inflammatory markers and reduced immune surveillance. A study published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute identified a link between shorter sleep duration and increased risk of colorectal and breast cancer. In this context, 6 to 8 hours of quality sleep is not a lifestyle preference. It functions as a biological requirement in cancer prevention terms. Bringing everything together, after the age of 50, the body's internal environment shifts toward chronic inflammation. This state can damage DNA, weaken immune surveillance, and create conditions that allow cancer to develop. The scientific evidence is consistent on this point. However, there are 3 primary, evidence-based strategies that act directly on this process. First, an anti-inflammatory dietary pattern centered on colorful vegetables, legumes, olive oil, fatty fish, berries, and whole grains, while limiting processed foods, refined sugar, and high intake of red meat. Second, 30 to 45 minutes of consistent daily moderate movement, which activates anti-inflammatory signaling molecules such as myokines and helps reduce hormonal drivers associated with cancer cell growth. Third, 6 to 8 hours of restorative sleep, which supports DNA repair mechanisms and preserves immune system function. None of these approaches require medication. None depend on expensive supplements or advanced medical treatments. They depend on understanding how the body functions at this stage of life and responding accordingly. There are cases where individuals in their 60s and 70s have adopted these changes and seen significant reductions in inflammatory markers within a span of 3 months. There are also individuals who once believed cancer risk was fixed due to family history, but later developed a different understanding of personal influence over health outcomes. Genes are not the sole determinant of destiny. The internal and external environment plays a major role, and it is more modifiable than many people assume. The key message is that informed choices at this stage of life can meaningfully influence biological processes linked to long-term health outcomes. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.